This Week in Music History. Start with the birthdays for This Week in Music History. This is covering February 25th through March 2nd. In no particular order, George Harrison was born on this day in 1943. That would have made him 81 years old. John Doe of X is 69. Stuart Wood of the Bay City Rollers is 65. Ever watched the movie So I Married an Axe Murderer? Mike Peters of The Alarm is 63. And every Gen Xer should know this person, or at least the voice of this person. Tex Avery, voice of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Elmer Fudd, and more, was born this week in 1908. Jackie Gleason was born today in 1916. Not sure why he's in the Week of Music, but hey, Jackie's Jackie. I Found My Thrill on Blueberry Hill. Fats Domino was born in 1928 this week, which would have made him 96. Johnny Cash would have been 92 this week, as he was born in 1932. Bob the Bear Height of Canned Heat was born today in 1943. Jonathan Cain, keyboardist for Journey, is 74 this week. Michael Bolton is 71 this week. I thought that was a surprise. Michael Bolton, 71. Jeremy Jazz Coleman, lead singer of Killing Joke, is 64. Tim Comerford of Rage Against the Machine is 56 this week. Mildred Bailey, the Queen of Swing, was born today in 1907. Neil Schon of Journey is 70 this week. Adrian Smith of Iron Maiden is 66 this week. Johnny Van Zant of Leonard Skinner is 64. Rosanda Chili Thomas of TLC is 53 this week. Wow. Josh Groban, 43 this week. Rolling Stones' Brian Jones would have been 82 this week, as he was born in 1942. Cindy Wilson of the B-52s is 67 this week. Pat Monahan of Train is 55 this week. Nigel Godrich, producer of Radiohead, Beck, and Atoms for Peace, is 53 this week. Jason Aldean is 47 this week. Jimmy Dorsey, for those of you who don't know, jazz clarinetist, saxophonist, trumpeter, composer, and big band leader, was born this week in 1904. This week, Gretchen Christopher of the Fleetwoods would have been 84. Musician, arranger, composer, and bandleader Glenn Miller was born this week in 1904. Miller's recordings include In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, Pennsylvania 65000, and Chattanooga Choo Choo. He would have been 120 this week as well. Ja Rule is 48. This week in 1927, Harry Belafonte was born. Jerry Fisher of Blood, Sweat, and Tears would have been 82 this week. What am I saying? He is 82 this week. Sorry, Jerry. Mike Diabo of Manfred Mann is 80 this week. Roger Daltrey of The Who is 80 this week. Happy birthday, guys. And in 1942, this week, Lou Reed was born. Justin Bieber is 30. Man, hasn't Justin Bieber, figured he would have been older by now. Lawrence Payton of the Four Tops was born on this day in 1938. Karen Carpenter was born this week in 1950. Jay Osmond, drummer of the Osmonds, is 68. Mark Evans, bass player for AC/DC, is 67 this week. John Cowsill of the Cowsills is 67 this week as well. John Bon Jovi is 61 this week. Wow. And Chris Martin of Coldplay is 46. And that concludes our birthdays for this week. Now Now on to some important dates in music history. Let's start with the 1950s. In 1957, Buddy Holly and the Crickets taped That'll Be the Day at their first session with producer Norman Petty at his studio in the eastern New Mexican town of Clovis. It would become Holly's biggest hit, rising to number 2 on the singles chart. 1955, for the first time since the 45 RPM format was introduced in 1949, Billboard reported that 45 RPM singles were outselling their earlier standard of 78s. And in 1955, Bo Diddley had his first recording session at Universal Recording Studio in Chicago, where he laid down the single Bo Diddley, which would go on to top the US R&B chart the following June. And in 1960s, in no particular order, 1967, the Spencer Davis Group peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 1 singles chart with Gimme Some Lovin', which was their first top 10 single in the United States. In 1965, I did not know this, guitarist Jimmy Page released a solo single called She Just Satisfies. Page played all the instruments on it except for the drums and produced the track as well as singing lead vocals. I'm gonna have to check that out. 1966, Nancy Sinatra went to number 1 on the US singles chart with These Boots Are Made for Walking. In 1961, Chubby Checker started a 3-week run at number 1 on the US singles chart with Pony Time, his second number 1 of the 1960s. In 1967, Pink Floyd laid down tracks for their first single, the psychedelic nugget Arnold Lane, written by Syd Barrett. Made it to number 1 in the UK, but had no impact whatsoever in the US. Hello everybody, and thanks for finding your way here. If this is your first time visiting this channel, thank you so much. If you are a returning visitor, excellent, really appreciate it. If you could hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, it's free, and I'd really appreciate it. It would help get these videos out and maybe hit that YouTube algorithm. Okay, now back for the rest of the show. Thank you. In 1963, Sam Cooke's 9th studio album, Mr. Soul, was released. 1968, the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band won Album of the Year, Best Cover, and Best Engineered and Recorded Album at the Grammy Awards. 1966, Gene Clark of the Byrds announced he was leaving the group due to his fear of flying. And in 1967, working at Abbey Road Studios, London, the Beatles started recording a new John Lennon song, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. The song was inspired by a drawing his 3-year-old son Julian returned home from school with one day. The picture, which was of a little girl with lots of stars, was his classmate. Trivia time, Lucy O'Donnell. 1968, Johnny Cash marries June Carter of the gospel stars, the Carter Family. And in 1969, Jim Morrison of The Doors is arrested on stage at a Miami show after allegedly exposing himself to the audience. In 1963, the Four Seasons became the first group to have 3 consecutive number 1 singles in the US when Walk Like a Man started a 3-week run at the top. In 1964, the Beatles began filming what would become their first feature film, A Hard Day's Night. In 1967, the Supremes recorded Reflections and The Happening. Which brings us to the 1970s. In 1977, the Eagles reached the top of the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart for the 3rd time with New Kid in Town, their first single off the Hotel California, which spent 1 week at the top. In 1970, members of the Jefferson Airplane were fined $1,000 for using profane language during a concert in Oklahoma City. 1971, Janis Joplin's album Pearl hit number 1 in the US, where it stayed for 9 weeks. In 1972, more than 25,000 people attended a Led Zeppelin concert in Sydney, Australia. Jimmy Page appeared, clean-shaven, having shaved off the beard he had been growing since the summer of 1970. This is a big one. In 1977, Keith Richards' Toronto hotel suite was raided by Royal Canadian Mounted Police while he was sleeping. Police seized 22 grams of heroin and 5 grams of cocaine, as well as narcotics paraphernalia. Richards was arrested and charged with possession of heroin with intent to traffic and with possession of cocaine. In 1970, Led Zeppelin played a gig in Copenhagen as the Knobs, after Eva von Zeppelin. A relative of the airship designer threatened to sue if the family name was used in Denmark. Also in 1970, Simon & Garfunkel started a 6-week run at the top of the US singles chart with Bridge Over Troubled Waters, also a #1 hit in the UK. In 1976, Paul Simon's Still Crazy After All These Years was named Best Pop Vocal Performance and Album of the Year at the 18th Annual Grammy Awards. In his acceptance speech, Simon told the audience, "I'd like to thank Stevie Wonder for not releasing an album this year." In 1977, Ray Charles was attacked by a member of his audience who tried to strangle him with a rope. Also in 1977, 2 members of Lynyrd Skynyrd were knocked unconscious after a scuffle broke out between the band and members of the Metropolitan Police boxing team, who were holding a dinner at the Royal Lancaster Hotel in London. Okay. In 1973, Pink Floyd released their 8th studio album, Dark Side of the Moon. No more be said about that. In 1974, Rush released their debut self-titled album, Rush. In 1975, the Eagles went on to #1 on the US singles chart with Best of My Love, the first of 5 US #1s for the band. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of Grammy Awards as 'tis the season. In 1974, Stevie Wonder won 4 Grammys. Album of the Year for Inner Visions, Best R&B Song, and Best Vocal for Superstition, and Best Pop Vocal Performance for You Are the Sunshine of My Life. In 1975, a policeman who stopped a Lincoln Continental for running a red light in Los Angeles was surprised to find Paul McCartney at the wheel, accompanied by his wife Linda. The cop detected a smell of marijuana, and on searching the car, found 8 ounces of the substance. Linda was arrested for possession of it. Way to go, Paul. All right, 1977, the Barry Manilow special aired on ABC TV. And that brings us to the 1980s. In no particular order. 1980, Bob Seger released his 11th studio album, Against the Wind, which was his 3rd album with the Silver Bullet Band. The album went on to reach #1 in the Billboard 200 album chart and sell 5 million copies in the US. And I remember this one, 1984. Jump by Van Halen started a 5-week run at #1 on the US singles chart. The song was released in December of '83 as the lead single from their album 1984 and is Van Halen's most successful single to date. A pair of U2 entries here. In 1980, after seeing U2 play at Dublin's National Boxing Stadium in front of 2,400 people, Rob Partridge and Bill Stewart from Island Records offered the band a recording contract. And in this week in 1985, U2 launched their first full-scale arena tour of North America, starting at the Dallas Reunion Arena in Texas. 1983 saw Michael Jackson's Thriller go to #1 on the US album chart. It went on to become the most successful album of all time with sales exceeding 50 million copies. In 1985, What's Love Got to Do With It by Tina Turner won Song of the Year and Record of the Year at the Grammys. The song was Turner's most successful single and came off the album Private Dancer. It was the 2nd biggest US single of 1984 and 17th biggest UK single. In 1993, What's Love Got to Do With It was used as the title for the biographical film about Turner's life. In 1985, I remember this, Bruce Springsteen won his first Grammy, taking home the Best Male Vocal Performance Award for Dancing in the Dark. In 1987, The Beatles, aka The White Album, became the first Beatles album to be released on CD. In 1980, winners at the Grammys Awards included the Doobie Brothers, What a Fool Believes for Song of the Year, Billy Joel's 57th Street for Album of the Year, Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive for Best Disco Record, and Michael Jackson won his first Grammy for Best R&B Performance for Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. In 1981, The Who released You Better You Bet, their first single since the death of their drummer Keith Moon in 1978. Their new stickman is Kenny Jones, formerly of The Faces. In 1984, Queen released their 11th album, The Works. It featured Radio Gaga and I Want to Break Free. This week in 1989, the Indigo Girls released their self-titled album featuring Closer to Fine. It was Amy Ray and Emily Saylor's 2nd studio album and major label debut on Epic Records. In 1983, another one from U2. U2 released their third album, War. The album is regarded as U2's first overtly political album, in part because of songs like Sunday Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day. War became U2's first album certified gold, and in 2012 was ranked as the 223rd on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. 1984, Michael Jackson won a record 7 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year for Thriller, Record of the Year, and Best Rock Vocal Performance for Beat It, Best Pop Vocal Performance, Best R&B Performance, and Best R&B Song for Billie Jean, and Best Recording for Children for E.T. the Extraterrestrial. 1984, Weird Al Yankovic released his second studio album, In 3D. It features Eat It. He owes a lot to Michael Jackson, we'll say that. And in 1988, Robert Plant released his fourth solo album, Now and Zen. The album peaked at number 10 on the UK chart. The tracks Heaven Knows and Tall Cool and featured guitarist Jimmy Page. Remember that blasting out of the radio. And in 1980, Blondie were at number 1 on the UK singles chart with Atomic, the group's third UK number 1 single from their album Eat to the Beat. And in 1984, Prince recorded When Doves Cry from the album Purple Rain. It was a worldwide hit and his first American number 1 single, topping the charts for 5 weeks. Kyrie, 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 Kyrie. Maybe it's Kyrie. In 1986, Mr. Kyrie, I think that's how you say it. I remember it, but I haven't listened to it in a while. Mr.'s Kyrie hit number 1 in America. The refrain, Kyrie eleison. It's Greek for Lord have mercy. Okay, learned something today. This one surprised me. Boy, have these contracts gone up. In 1989, Madonna started a $5 million sponsorship deal with Pepsi Cola. I wonder what she would get today. In 1983, a new digital audio format, a 5-inch compact disc, or CD, containing up to 1 hour of music was launched by Sony, Philips, and Polygram. And in 1984, This Is Spinal Tap was released in theaters, chronicling the hapless heavy metal band with exploding drummers and an amp that goes to 11. In 1985, Wham! Started a 3-week run at number 1 on the Billboard album chart with Make It Big. U2's been busy. In 1988, U2 win their first Grammy Awards, taking Album of the Year and Best Performance by Rock Duo or Group with vocal for The Joshua Tree. And in 1989, Like a Prayer becomes the first hit song to debut in a commercial when it is used in a 2-minute Pepsi ad starring Madonna. That's it for the 80s. Let's go to the 90s. In 1995, at a private party for 1,200 select guests on the closing night of the Frank Sinatra Desert Classic Golf Tournament, Frank Sinatra sang before a live audience for the very last time. His closing song was The Best Is Yet to Come. 1995, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, who toured under the moniker Page and Plant, kicked off their first tour together in 15 years at the Pensacola Civic Center in Pensacola, Florida. In 1991, James Brown was granted an early parole and set free in Columbus, South Carolina after serving 2 years of a 6-year prison sentence for resisting arrest after a car chase across 2 states. I vaguely remember that. In 1993, Whitney Houston's single I Will Always Love You reached its 14th week at number 1, a new record. In 1995, this record was broken by One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men. In 1995, Jewel released her debut album, Pieces of You. Wow, it doesn't seem that long ago. In 1996, this doesn't seem that long ago either. Nirvana's Unplugged won Best Alternative Album, and Coolio won Best Rap Performance with Gangsta's Paradise at the Grammys. In 1996, Alanis Morissette won Album of the Year at the Grammys for Jagged Little Pill and Best Female Rock Vocal and Best Rock Song for You Oughta Know. She was the youngest artist to ever win the Album of the Year, a record she held until 2010 when Taylor Swift won the prize for Fearless. Taylor breaks another record. In 1998, Celine Dion's My Heart Will Go On from the movie Titanic went to number 1 in the US. The film had been number 1 at the box office since December 21st, 1997. In 1992, Mr. Big started a 3-week run at #1 on the US singles chart with To Be With You. And in this week, 1994, Beck released his 3rd studio album, Mellow Gold. The single Loser became a defining song for the 90s and made him a rising star. Yes, as a Gen Xer, I definitely remember that. And in 1990, Janet Jackson played the first night of her 120-night Rhythm Nation World Tour at the Miami Arena in Florida. As part of the show, Jackson had a live panther on stage, but after concerns were raised over safety of the crowds and several incidents of the panther urinating on the stage, Jackson got rid of the cat in the summer leg of the tour. 1991, director Oliver Stone's biopic The Door, starring Val Kilmer, opened in Los Angeles. In 1993, the Cranberries released their debut studio album, Everybody Else Is Doing It, So Why Can't We? And in 1994, Nirvana played their final ever concert when they appeared at the Terminal 1 in Munich, Germany. And in 1994 as well, the Bodyguard soundtrack won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year with I Will Always Love You, taking Record of the Year as well. In 1995, Bruce Springsteen's Streets of Philadelphia won 3 Grammys for Song of the Year, Best Male Vocal Performance, and Best Rock Song. In 1995, during a gig in Switzerland, REM drummer Bill Berry collapsed on stage from a ruptured brain aneurysm. He recovered and later rejoined the band. In 1997, Bowie bonds were issued on the US Stock Exchange. Linked to David Bowie's back catalog albums with money earned on the bonds via interest from royalties, investors could expect to make an 8% profit in 10 years. Wonder how that turned out. Let's get to the 2000s. In 2001, Daft Punk's second album, Discovery, marked a change in their musical direction from house to electronic disco. Taking a leaf from fellow European electronic artist Kraftwerk, they chose to hide their faces, performing and appearing in music videos wearing stylized robotic helmets. In 2002, the Bee Gees played what was to be their final concert, performing at Miami Beach's Love and Hope Ball, a benefit for the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation. In 2005, Ray Charles hit #1 on the US album chart with Genius Loves Company. 2016, 21 Pilots, Stressed Out, peaks at #2 on the Billboard Hot 100, where it stays for 1 week. It's the duo's first foray into the top 10. In 2000, Sir Elton John stormed out of the opening of his new Broadway musical show, Ada, after 15 minutes complaining that his songs had been ruined. 2016, 76-year-old Ginger Baker posted on his blog that he had canceled all of his scheduled shows for the year and was going to immediate retirement. The former drummer for Cream and Blind Faith revealed that his doctor had just diagnosed him with serious heart problems, causing him to announce, "No more gigs for this old drummer." And that is it for the news relating to this week in music history. Now we will go on to the artist that we lost this week in music history. In 1968, 25-year-old Frankie Lyman, lead singer of the Teenagers, died of a heroin overdose in his grandmother's New York home. In 1977, blues guitarist Booker White died at the age of 67 in Memphis, Tennessee. Died of cancer. In 1977, doo-wop singer Sherman Garms of Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers died of a heart attack at age 36. In 1991, Frank Smith from Air Supply died of a pneumonia in Melbourne, Australia. And in 1999, Dusty Springfield died after a long battle against cancer at the age of 59. International polls have named Springfield among the best female rock artists of all time, and she is a member of the Rock and Roll and UK Music Hall of Fame. With a career that extended from the late 50s to the 1990s, she had 6 top 20 singles on the US Billboard Hot 100 and 16 on the UK singles chart, including What Have I Done to Deserve This, You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, Wishing and Hoping, and Son of a Preacher Man. And in 2019, publicist and talent manager Kenneth Pitt died at the age of 96. He managed the career of musicians including David Bowie, and was responsible for publicizing American musicians and bands touring the UK, including Frank Sinatra, Duke Ellington, and Jerry Lee Lewis. In 2011, Mark Tulin Bassist for the Electric Prunes died of a heart attack at age 62. And in 2019, Andy Anderson died at the age of 68. He is best known for his work with The Cure, playing on the singles Love Cats and The Caterpillar. He also worked with many other artists including Steve Hillage, Edwin Collins, Mike Oldfield, The Gun Club, and Peter Gabriel. In 2011, blues musician Eddie Kirkland died at the age of 87. In 2013, Richard Street, singer with the Monitors and the Temptations, died at the age of 70. Ooh, and a bad way to go, in 2015, R&B singer Charmaine Maxwell of the 90s group Brownstone died in a freak accident at age 46 when she fell on a broken wine glass and cut her neck. And in 2015, Leonard Nimoy died at the age of 83. The actor, best known for his playing Spock on Star Trek, also made a musical impact. His albums, Mr. Spock's Music from Outer Space and Two Sides of Leonard Nimoy, both charted in the US, number 83 and number 97 respectively. And his voice was sampled in the Information Society hit What's on Your Mind? Pure Energy. Live long and prosper. And in 2019, Doug Sandom died one day after his 89th birthday. He was the first drummer for The Who. No recordings with Sandown playing with the band were ever released. In 2008, Mike Smith, lead vocalist and keyboardist for the Dave Clark Five, died of a pneumonia at the age of 64. In 2012, Davy Jones, the Manchester-born lead singer of the Monkees, died at age 66 in his sleep at his home in Florida after suffering a heart attack. And lastly, in 2019, Country Music Hall of Fame member Fred Foster died at age 87. He is credited as the producer behind all of Roy Orbison's biggest hits, including Oh Pretty Woman, Only the Lonely, and Crying, and also produced major hits for Dolly Parton, Willie Nelson, Ray Stevens, and Chris Christopherson. And that is it for the news for the week ending March 2nd. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. We'll try this again next week. Take care.